Good morning, class of 2024. My group and I will be talking today about traumatic brain injuries in the homeless population. The other members of the group in order of appearance are Frederick, Megan, and Matt. Next slide. Traumatic brain injury is defined as a damage to the brain tissue resulting from a range of causes, such as motor vehicle accidents, child abuse, domestic violence, and contact sports. TBI is experienced by more than 160,000 people every year in Canada and is the leading cause of death and disability for Canadian age 35 and under. TBI has long physical, sensory, cognitive consequences such as loss of coordination and balance, chronic pain, seizures, depression, substance abuse, and developmental problems in children. Next slide. Homelessness is experienced by approximately 235,000 in any given year in Canada, and various studies demonstrated the link between TBI incidents and homelessness. Single men and indigenous people constitute the bulk of the homeless demographic, with the cause including loss of income, intimate partner violence, and adverse childhood experiences. People living in homelessness are faced daily with risk of physical assault, social isolation, discrimination, and substance abuse. Next slide. Addressing traumatic brain injury in the homeless population is crucial because it will lead to better services for that population, targeted social reinsertion programs, and decreased burden on the healthcare and carceral system. Next slide. Our logic model presented here shows the risk factor associated with TBI and homelessness and the efficient interventions to reduce the prevalence and incidence of both. For example, devoting more programs to address childhood abuse, providing income support and job training opportunities, better reinsertion and homeless housing program all have an effect in either preventing people from going into homelessness or getting the people that are already living in it out of it. Now to Frederick, thanks.
Thank you, Thierry. One of the first risk factors that we really need to take into account is childhood abuse. Why? Because recently reports demonstrate that the first traumatic brain injury in homeless population was reported to be as early as during her early childhood. Main of these traumatic brain injury is due to children maltreatment. In a recent study and a review published by Health Canada, they showed that approximately 6.5% of total TBR are due to child maltreatment. It is really important. Why? Because we need to because child maltreatment lead not only to high risk of TBI, but also can lead to some drug and alcohol abuse, healthy risk behavior, some disease, and later on homelessness in adulthood. Another risk factor is sports and recreation activities. In another review, they showed that higher risk of head concussion and leading to traumatic brain injury was reported in ice hockey, rugby, and ringette, not only in men, but also in women's sports. It is really important to increase the awareness of concussion and TBI in sport community. An example of this is, it was a change done by Hockey Canada in 2013 when they seen an interdiction to defensive physical contact to younger player, and overall we can see a little decrease of TBI, which can be set as a good example for other sports. Another and really important risk factor of TBI is head injury following motor vehicle collisions. Unfortunately, some population are in higher risk, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcycle, because they are less protected than the vehicle by itself. And recent studies showed that a lot of this head injury leading to TBI was due to distraction by phone utilization and alcohol consumption, which is all behavior that we can change, that we can create some program to sensitize population, and that's it.
A primary cause of TBI within individuals already experiencing homelessness is victimization from violence. Examining meta-analyses and survey-based studies throughout Canadian cities, it can be estimated that at least 1 in 2 homeless individuals have experienced a TBI, with a lifetime prevalence of 53% in a 2020 meta-analysis. A survey of homeless people utilizing shelters in Waterloo found that 41% reported being victims of violent attacks since becoming homeless, and cruelty and aggression against this population by the general public is well documented, such as the murder of Harley Lawrence, who was burned alive in a bus station, though affected individuals are often hesitant to seek out legal or medical assistance. Next slide. There is considerable methodological heterogeneity across TBI studies in this population, such as evaluating TBI severity, as some studies necessitated a loss of consciousness to consider a head injury a TBI, while others did not. But using loss of consciousness as an exclusive screening criteria might result in a lower estimated prevalence as compared to the standard World Health Organization criteria. Despite these differences in prevalence estimates, the most common mechanism of injury was assault across all studies that evaluated mechanism of injury, and the age of onset was on average 15. Lowering the threshold for referral of homeless individuals to a neuroimaging specialist could be a consideration for frontline healthcare workers, in conjunction with emphasizing the recognition of TBI from the frame of vulnerability in this population to violence. Next slide. Permanent housing is a critical first step to decreasing violence and propagating TBI in the homeless, as stability and access to basic amenities is a strong deterrent for competitive violence and aggression. Policy groups strongly advocate for national housing strategies, such as the 20,000 Homes campaign and Built for Zero in Canada, to be implemented concurrently with mental health care treatment and social support, rather than older stepwise models of treatment first, housing second. The lack of access to affordable housing is a pervasive systemic barrier facing homeless Canadians. For example, there are over 100,000 people on subsidized housing waitlists in the Toronto area alone, and an estimated 98% occupancy rate in Toronto shelters each night. Next slide.
Recommendations for reducing the prevalence of TBI-associated homelessness should focus on addressing the root causes of traumatic brain injuries. We recommend programs that will reduce head injury caused by both accident and abuse. Since traumatic head injuries often occur in children, we encourage programs and policy that promote head safety via education and environmental modifications, such as safer playgrounds. However, the majority of TBIs in youth stem from abuse. As abuse is closely connected with poverty and the social determinants of health, we recommend a comprehensive set of policy reforms that aim to lessen the poverty burden. Such programs include access to affordable job training, childcare, and transportation. In addition, we recommend the expansion of government assistance and social safety nets that financially support those who are disadvantaged, some of which are listed. It is also important to, next slide. It is also important to address individuals with TBI who are homeless or live in poverty. Our first recommendation is to prioritize access to low-cost and high-quality housing for these individuals. This includes short-term benefits to help people make rent, the maintenance of existing social housing, and increase funding to community organizations to allow for greater interim housing capacity. To create greater abundancy of social housing, we also recommend inclusionary zoning policies that allow for the development of affordable housing. An example of this is providing tax rebates for private developers that donate units for affordable housing. We also recommend the implementation of outreach-based programs where agencies meet clients where they feel most comfortable, such as coffee shops or in their homes. Lastly, we recommend ongoing cross-sectoral training programs for groups that routinely serve people with TBIs, such as social workers and police. Next slide. In order to measure the effect of policy, it is crucial to collect information on the prevalence of traumatic brain injury in people who live in poverty or who are homeless. Point-in-time counts are effective at providing a snapshot of homelessness by looking at prevalence on a single day or week via shelter bed occupancy, occupancy in women's shelters, and individuals in prison with no fixed address. To determine the prevalence of TBI in the homeless population, an adjacent questionnaire would need to be administered in order to determine their history and background related to TBI, as well as their current needs. To recognize the many risk factors of homelessness, this questionnaire should include demographic questions about gender, age, race, and sexual orientation. This questionnaire could also determine what services they use, whether they are interested in housing, and the duration of their homelessness. Next slide. While some financial aid will help to immediately reduce homelessness in this population, other indicators will only exhibit decreases of prevalence of TBI over longer periods of time. It is also important to keep in mind the limits of indicators. For example, point-in-time counts are likely to miss individuals who are dealing with poverty but are not occupying shelters. Similarly, in-person questionnaires will not account for homeless people who are difficult to locate or who are not in the shelter system. The limitations of different prevalence methodologies highlights the importance of adopting a comprehensive approach where different prevalence indicators are used concurrently. Next slide. We're happy to take any questions, and here are references.